Hot takes, everyone's got them, but only a select few are brave enough to share. I've seen a few people within the online MLP fandom space make these videos, and I feel like throwing my hat in the ring. When's the last time I've responded to you people directly? Aside from pinning comments I thought were funny. So today, we're looking at strong, maybe unusual, opinions about MLP, submitted by my audience. Let's get into it. And you know what? Let's get real brain rotty with it. Get some of that Roblox gameplay I recorded a year ago in the background. Make it a little bit more visually interesting.
Magical Mystery Cure should not have been a purely musical episode. I feel like because it was, the plot's pacing was super all over the place and the problem got resolved too fast.
I agree a little bit. As much as I like the songs in that episode, I think there was some more that could have been conveyed by having more straightforward dialogue in certain areas. Morning in Ponyville comes to mind. Again, as much as I like the song, I feel like they're trying to cram as much as possible into 22 minutes, which they are. They could have cut down on Twilight reiterating how nice of a day it is, same with Celestia's little ditty and Twilight's emo song in the middle, but cutting out what my cutie mark is telling me and a true friend, get out of here. I've seen complaints about the lyrics to true friend being vague, but the visuals on screen cover a lot of that up. What my cutie mark is telling me is a classic, and I think those songs actually convey the story faster than walking around to each individual pony. I think a better fix for the episode's pacing, anonymous viewer, would have been to make it a two-parter. Why didn't they do that? Would have been too similar to the Return of Harmony, I guess, but who cares?
Brony culture was filled with a lot of highly questionable stuff that should be called out, and being a part of the fandom is perfectly valid. Are two statements that can and should exist simultaneously.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things within the brony space, past and present, that I sort of disavow. Like, I'm not gonna break open your door if you're drawing risque art of the pony characters, but I wish it was more separated from the vanilla side of the fandom. I shouldn't see a post from insert large MLP fandom outlet here with, what did I say in the brony dog video? Oddly sultry art of the ponies with mother-bearing hips and like the stupid thigh highs. Even if it's not explicit in any way, you can tell when someone's drawing it for Goonie purposes. Even just like the faces, when they draw the facial features too soft and round, you know what I'm talking about. Things like that aren't what I personally engage with My Little Pony for. But back to the topic at hand, I think there shouldn't be anything wrong with liking something and still thinking that some, or majority, of the fans are, you know, I'll let you fill in the blanks.
Princess Celestia should have been the final boss of the series. I'm talking some real reverse nightmare moonshes. The whole series was leading up to this kind of stuff. Daybreaker should have been foreshadowing. And in the last season, Celestia finally cracks.
Well, she is an evil manipulator, apparently. I think in terms of marketing, Hasbro would never let the writers do anything like that, but it is a fun idea. Remember, early on in the series, Celestia was scary. She was intimidating. People were terrified of her. I remember this theory floating around about Steven Universe, when that show was just beginning to get more serialized, that the Crystal Gems were actually the bad guys all along, and Steven would have to face off against them in the final battle. Never happened, of course, but could you imagine a kid's show doing that?
I find Starlight Glimmer quite boring, and she doesn't really offer much to the series. The show should have ended around season 5 or 6 despite how climactic the season 4 finale was. It gets repetitive and often boring after that point. It's okay to end a show, especially when the main characters have completed their ultimate goals. You likewise can't keep heightening the stakes because it makes each of the finales less satisfying. The show lost a lot of its charm as well, the characters becoming quite flanderized.
This was a very long one, but I think it's valid. I'm not the biggest fan of the Starlight episodes outside the one where she wants to kill Trixie. I know she's a very polarizing character, and I think something like her could have had a place in the show, but I agree with most people that her episodes could have been done better. Now, I'm pretty sure you all know, I kind of fell off the show after season 4, so I do like the idea of them shutting the book right after. Of course, I don't think the season 5 or 6 finale would have been good finales for the whole series, like season 4's would have been. If they had tacked on an episode like the real series finale at the end of 5 or 6, it could have worked.
I actually like the idea of G5 being connected to G4. G4 had such an interesting and engaging world that I wanted to learn more about. It felt like G5 was another opportunity to expand the world of Friendship is Magic. I understood why people were concerned though, and, in the end, yeah, the way they went about exploring the world was personally not my cup of tea, but I am sure there are people who liked it. Smiley face.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't watch much of G5 after the first few episodes of the Netflix show. I know there's Opaline, who was like Celestia and Luna's little friend. There's grown-up Spike, who has the worst voice I've heard so far in any MLP thing. I feel like connecting it to G4 presented them with an interesting challenge, making something in the mold of that show, but everything I hear about G5 is just underwhelming. Overall, they could have done interesting things with it, but I feel like it fell flat. Maybe one day when the dust has settled, I'll watch through G5, but not now. I gotta review Pony Life first. Remember Pony Life? It's a sweet, magic, fast, posh, fun, cute Pony Life!
I don't know if it's a hot take, but I hate that Trixie didn't become like stronger and a bigger villain. I'd kinda feel like they could have done a lot with that.
I disagree. I think Magic Duel was a fine end to her villain arc, and they were right to redeem her when they did. I understand there are mixed thoughts about having her true redemption be a Starlight episode. I would have liked to see what they would have done with her independently. Maybe in My Darling Season 4, which I acknowledge is not the best season. You could have had something tie into the whole journal thing with the little artifacts. There are some appearances of Trixie in the comics and books that still have her as a bad guy, which are really interesting. I like in the very first book where she and Gilda are just kind of running around Ponyville kicking over barrels and stuff like that. For as much of a fan favorite character Trixie was, they really limit her appearances in those early episodes. I think if it wasn't for demand, she wouldn't even come back at all.
Spike is one of the best and most realistic depictions of a young boy in fictional media.
I agree. There's something really charming about a lot of the Spike episodes. Something about his bravado and overall attitude is pretty spot on to how you'd imagine a young boy would act. I think it comes from them not having to market the show to what would be his demographic. They can show him being wrong or full of himself or all that without worrying about alienating anybody. I think it gets lost in some of the later episodes when you have him hanging out with Ember or Smolder and all that. Episodes like Dragon Quest or Spike at Your Service stand out. You know, the prime Spike episodes. Spike haters are very much not welcome on the channel.
Hasbro forgot how to make toys, and we can see it with G5. I hope they revert back on doing different characters, use different materials for the toys like the fuzzies, the pearlized ones, glittery, etc. I want diverse characters on the toys, not the main ones with different accessories in each release.
I haven't been super into collecting the toys, at least not for a while, but from what I've heard, it seems to be the case that starting even in late G3, there was a lot more focus on a core set of characters instead of a large variety of collectible ponies. I guess they lucked out in G4 since people liked the characters, but from things like the Jenny Nicholson video, there was still a complaint about them only focusing on them. G5, the toys just look bad. It's a trickle down from the not too appealing Disney-esque 3D art style. I've said it before that the G5 toys were always sort of in the back of the toy aisle at Target whenever I'd go. Even now, it's genuinely hard to find where any MLP stuff is. That's why I agree Hasbro needs to put more of their eggs into the toy basket and stop trying to recapture G4. If they went back to G3-esque designs with some new branding and a few years down the line started another show with a whole new continuity, I think there could be some appeal there.
I think Twilight should have stayed a unicorn. I always hated as a kid how the whole point was the main six were equally important parts of the elements of harmony, but now suddenly Twilight's a princess and the whole dynamic shifted. Like, I get that she's the main protagonist, but making her so tangibly more important than the rest sucked.
That's an interesting way to look at it, and I haven't really heard that take before, that it takes the focus away from the other main six. I can see how you feel like that, because a lot of the Twilight episodes, starting in Season 4, revolved around her being a princess and so high and mighty and important. And in most of those, it's not even about her doing princessy things, more her reacting to having royal status.
If we have to have Flurry Heart, which we do, and we have to have G5 connected to G4, then couldn't we have, I don't know, combined them, used the newest Pink Princess as something more than a baby to sell merch, told us what her title becomes, explain what happens to her and her family? If they're still not around, it's wasted potential. And that would get rid of the new baby dragon whose name I don't care to Google. 2 problems solved in 1.
Yeah, if Flurry Heart was made to sell toys, why didn't they bring her into the spotlight more? You're right, I'm glad they didn't set G5 immediately after the events of G4, but still, if they're gonna continue it, it would have been a good idea to use the baby. I think they had to strip down a lot of the use of the G4 stuff in G5, just so that they could have the recognizable characters front and center. You know, Twilight, Spike, the main six. When I was a kid in like 2014, I had an idea for G5, like, yeah, they're gonna have the Cutie Mark Crusaders be the new characters, which would have been somehow better than the actual G5 and probably worse in some ways.
I enjoy the newer style from the later seasons, but I really don't like that it moved away from Lauren's original UPA/retro cartoon style. I also don't like that marketing images. The coloring books did this a lot, kinda bastardized her original concept sketches.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot. MLP was one of those last big shows, I'd like to say, made in that UPA revival style from the 90s and 2000s. For those who aren't familiar, UPA was a studio from the 50s founded by a bunch of disgruntled ex-Disney employees, a tale as old as time. A lot of their shorts were influenced by modern art of the day, and while a lot of their work actually branches out into more unique styles, they're most known for this kind of flat, thick outline look that started to make a comeback in the 80s but really exploded in the 90s, with shows like Dexter, Powerpuff, etc., the latter of which Lauren Faust worked on. In her sketches, you can see a little bit of that design philosophy, making the characters out of pretty simple shapes. The influence here is mixed with different things, like I assume there was some anime too, with those big ol' eyes. Anyways, I really like how some of these pieces look, and you can tell that some of them got recycled into some pretty infamous pieces of stock art. Anyway, yeah, early MLP had a very clear art style that kinda got muddied when you had the crew swap out for different people over the years. The early Canterlot and Ponyville backgrounds I want to point out because they look nothing like the backgrounds they'd end up doing later on. That kind of flat, geometric, whimsical art style got abandoned. And yeah, I count it as a loss. You can especially tell with those Season 8, Season 9 faces that they were thinking about things differently, for better or for worse. I got a lot of other takes about how people don't like the look of the G4, G5 ponies because they don't look enough like horses, but I think the big fall off from G4 to G5 is that it's not stylized in a good way. In G4, you can look at Lauren's designs and see the intention behind making their snouts as small as they did. In G5, I don't know what they're doing. Like, there is an appeal to the way that Emalu draws ponies with these soft outlines and warm colors, but like hell if that appeal got translated into this ugly mess. Enough of my art talk. G6 or G7 could benefit from a more distinct art style and a distinct creative voice. I don't know who. Get Jorge Gutierrez to make it. Joking, but you can imagine in your head right now. That would look awesome.
I always felt that Rainbow Dash has a dark secret or tragic past experience she hides really well, something that never gets explored in the show. I can't press my finger on it. I just have this feeling that if confronted with it, she would try to brush it off with her usual bravado, but deep down it would shake her to record that someone else knew. Again, I can't explain why, but that suspicion always creeps up on me. That probably doesn't count as a hot take, but if any of the main six has a dark secret, it is by far most likely Rainbow Dash.
That's crazy because that's kind of already in the show. Remember Rainbow Crash? I kinda like this take. It's an interesting parallel to the whole Pinkie Pie and her sisters were abused as children theory. I think Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash are my least favorite because they're the most bombastic in their own way. I like the episodes where it'll be characters having down-to-earth realistic conflicts, but you know, here comes Pinkie Pie being goofy silly bananas and Rainbow Dash being Rainbow Dash. That's my opinion on it.
I absolutely hate how they had the comics showcase lore that wouldn't be talked about in the show, then entirely threw it all away in later seasons. There are so many theories and canons in the comics that many, including myself, loved. Then they threw it all away. It makes me so angry. They had so much world building going on, but then decided they needed to milk the show as much as they could.
Yeah, it's strange. Debatable whether the comics and the show are in the same continuity. All the stuff about Star Swirl, if I remember, does contradict the show. I feel like if they were to adapt the comics into the show or vice versa, there would be some sort of outcry from fans that they're being lazy. There also might be an issue with who to credit for writing said episode if it was based on a comic from another author. Would there be royalties involved? But then again, I don't know. There is a lot in the comics they could have pulled from. I can imagine an abridged version of Sombra's backstory coming in if they ever brought him back in a meaningful way. I remember the comics mostly for all the silly stuff, but some of the arcs could have been made into good episodes. Also the books too, the Cutie Mark Crusader mysteries, those totally could have been an arc.
Twilight should have been an Earth pony. It makes for a richer payoff when she becomes a princess and her studying magic despite being an Earth pony would be a great message to kids that where you're from doesn't determine who you can be.
Remember, they were gonna do that for G5, but instead we got Sunny. In either generation, I agree it could have been a really cool idea to see a character escape the pre-established box they've been put in. They didn't even do that with Sunny to my knowledge.
The CMC's special talents were very clearly set up in the early seasons. The special talent they got later on was stupid. I don't know what compelled them to do it like that, but it feels to me like some lazy message they were trying to get across. Out of everything they did in the series, this one is the only one that I hate with a passion because I can't see why they all had to have the same corporate sanitized talent instead of giving them their own unique talents.
Corporate sanitized I don't think is the right word to use, since I doubt it was Hasbro going down to the writers and saying, hey, give them all the same thingy. That being said, I did get a lot of takes about the CMC's cutie marks being off and or ugly. I get it. It would have been cool to see an alternate timeline where they each get them gradually, have them in their own little spotlight roles. I also agree with someone who I can't find here that their episodes post Crusaders of the Lost Mark were less interesting compared to others. That's kind of how I look at it. It's like Spike, once you have the kid character who's meant to be the kid character mature, what do you do?
So this is kinda more of a take about the fandom, I guess, but I feel like a lot of fans forget who the show is for. Like, I get that its writing can be enjoyed by anyone, but come on y'all, in the first 4 seasons they would literally say the moral out loud so that the kid target audience would know what it was. And PPL, mainly on TikTok, act like the characters are horrible people when they need to act like that sometimes to teach the moral. And of course it's fine to critique the show, but in my opinion the target audience should be kept in mind in those critiques. I could go on for longer, but we would be here all day lol.
Yeah, people need to get it through their skulls. While there's nothing wrong with liking the show as a show, you do need to take that step back into reality. It's not for adults. Something I've been trying to do as a 20-year-old man who makes most of my income talking about the show is to try and broaden my media palette. Listen dude, Tubi is free, they got a lot of cool movies on there. And please, if you're over a certain age, you need to be watching other things besides kids' cartoons. It's like food. Sure, you can have bright, colorful sweets, but you gotta have your proteins and your veggies and your grains. Watch something for adults, not Family Guy, not anime, a live action or prestige animated movie for grown-ups.
As much as My Little Pony friendship is magic needed to end and got milked dry by Hasbro, I would have still preferred them keeping it rather than starting a new generation that milks a FIM either way.
They really truly had the choice between rebooting the main 6 or making a sequel series, from the looks of it. I know in the alternate universe where the main 6 reboot came out, people are rioting in the streets wishing they got RG5. I said it before, give it to China. Let them make their own FIM Donghua. That's what they say instead of Chinese anime. Listen, I prefer Western animation, but there's no doubt they'd put more care into it than a Western studio under the supervision of Hasbro would. It's like how Tokyo Disneyland is technically run by a different company, so they get to splurge and have all the cool stuff that they're too cheap to build at the American Disney parks. Have you seen the Japanese Tower of Terror? Dude, look at this.
I hate Pinky. More like I hate Pinky later in the show. Her personality definitely got flanderized the quickest out of the main 6. They massacred her, not gonna lie. By the end of the show all of her lines are headache-inducing screeches. They make her seem so dumb, and sometimes just like borderline a jerk.
This is a problem they fall into a lot. In order to have Pinkie Pie be funny, they sort of forget that the show is about learning to be friends and just have her be obnoxious, to the detriment of like everybody around her. When I was little, I was one of those kids who would repeat jokes from shows or whatever, or act random because people did it on TV, and let me tell you, that didn't net me many friends. I think she's more bearable in certain episodes than in others. Even in the pilot, there are a few moments where you're like, yeah. But then in the second half, she goes and sings Giggle at the Ghosties, which is the best kind of Pinkie Pie moment. Or in Swarm of the Century, where people think she's being random, and at the end, she comes in and fixes everything. She's random, but she's not stupid, and I feel like they lean towards stupid most of the time for the sake of humor.
I don't like the fact that they use Rarity to use Spike for her advantage. They could have taught kids a valuable lesson on to not like adults because it can happen, but she just uses him for what she wants, and I don't like that.
That could have been a great Season 9 episode. Instead of leaving Sparity up in the air, or the one with the love triangle between her and Gabby the Griffin, the iconic character, have a definitive end to Spike crushing on her, where she sits him down and is like, you are 8 years old and I'm a grown woman. And that would have been a good lesson. A daring one for a children's show like MLP to bring up, and and depending on how they went about it, it might have been too mature.
Fluttershy simps are really weird to me because of the context of the show. Lauren made the main 6 to be between 20 and 30 years old. It is said multiple times that Fluttershy is the oldest of the bunch. Let's say she's 26 years old, and it is implied that every season is a year that goes by. That means that by season 9 Fluttershy is almost 36 years old, has problems to make friends, has problems to engage with other ponies because of social anxiety, is kinda having her first boyfriend, Discord, and a lot of other things that are abnormal at her age and causes a lot of difficulties in her life. I don't know how people can see such a troubled life and say waifu when I think of a 30-plus-year woman with all of those problems and think of it as an horror story. Even in the first seasons, she has 25-plus years and still has problems to do things such as go to stores. I have nothing against Fluttershy. I think that she's really well made, and for a pony with her problems is natural for her to take baby steps learning the same lessons every season. My only problem, that is not a problem, it's just something that I find really weird, is how people can see such a troubled life and say I want to boink that horse so badly.
Wow, thanks for dragging her. But that was a unique perspective. I think a lot of the more off-the-deep-end brony types would actually swoon at the idea of a 25-year-old neat woman with extreme social anxiety, and a lot of them probably realize that about Fluttershy. So I think that point is pretty null and void for most people. Like, people are into the characters they're into, no matter what.
Maybe not a hot take, but there are no such thing as a child who is evil for no reason, and I hate Cozy's ending Liamao. Also, she's such a fun character and I love her.
I got a lot of comments like this. It's a convincing take because, yeah, were you, viewer watching this right now, truly evil for the things you did when you were 10? I do think it's funny that a child was evil and got turned to stone, but I do see the perspective a lot of fans have that she didn't deserve to be lumped in with T-Rex and Chrysalis as, like, evil monsters.
I don't like the Student 6. I'll try to explain the best I can, but I just feel like they're useless characters, and they, and the school in general, take up too much time in the later seasons from the main 6 and made their episodes just feel like filler. I know that G5 is not cohesive in its own show, but it's so strange for the elements of harmony to go from ponies to non-ponies, then right back to G5, back to ponies again. I think it's out of character for characters like Applejack, Fluttershy and Pinkie Pie to become fully fledged teachers at all. Especially Pinkie Pie. Looping back to the Student 6, but I don't like the fact that it's either so obvious or so vague what element that they represent that it's hard to tell.
That's a really great point about the Student 6's respective elements. I have no idea off the top of my head which one is which. TBH. During my most recent watch through, I did like the Student 6 episodes because they were something new, but a lot of their appearances are honestly as burdens the main 6 have to worry about not killing with whatever shenanigans are happening at the school that week. I also agree that a good half of the main 6 aren't too believable as teachers. That should have been an episode where they reconcile with their new jobs and are like, how do we do this? Yeah, get me on the staff. I'll hashtag save MLP.
It wasn't that good of a show. Like, as a massive fan who obsesses over it, it's almost like just if Warrior Cats had a bigger fandom and a smaller amount of canon media attached to it. It's really good if you like creatively open-ended world building that's great for fanfiction and roleplay, but outside of a small handful of really good episodes, the show itself is usually at most just entertaining but not much more. This isn't to say it's bad, just that it's not all that good, especially compared to a lot children's media then and since.
My Little Pony Friendship is Magic is not the best thing in the world. There's a reason it got the audience it did, but I really think there are better things to watch, released both before and since. Like, as much as I talk about it on the channel, I'm not really watching MLP every day. I think a lot of the clout it has now is mainly because of nostalgia, either for watching it growing up or for being there during the whole brony craze.
Thanks for the Memories isn't the best episode about grief. Tank doesn't actually pass away, so it kinda feels like Rainbow Dash overreacted to her tortoise's hibernation and blew up a weather factory.
I don't understand too well how people are able to relate this episode to grief, because Rainbow is gonna have Tank back in the spring. I mean, the sadness she goes through could be seen as grief, but they could have had something more explicit if they wanted to talk about it. I don't know. You really can look at it however you want.
I've never loved how demonized introverted characters are in the show. They treat anyone who doesn't want to spend time with others 24/7 like they're a criminal. The show also demonizes anyone who doesn't want to participate in activities and festivities, like Starlight not wanting to participate in Hearth Swarming and Twilight acts all shocked and offended like just leave her alone? If she doesn't want to participate, that's fine?
Yeah, for Starlight that makes total sense. There never was that point in the show where they teach the lesson, hey, sometimes people want to be alone. I think Amending Fences was something like that, but overall that's another main character brings other character out of their shell episode. The one with Cranky Doodle is another. I don't think it's causing any real harm, but they are teaching the lesson that if you bother someone with just the right thing, they'll like you.
I never understood the appeal of Stygian / the Pony of Shadows. He just felt like a clone of Nightmare Moon. They should have done more to flesh him out and make him more unique.
Bro, Stygian sucks. That whole arc with the pillars in season 7 felt like a whole bunch of nothing. Characters, besides Star Swirl, who come out of nowhere, including this villain who has no charisma, no interesting motivation we haven't seen, no backstory.
No story, no motive, no reason, and no background checks.
It just felt like, well, we need to have a big magic thing at the end of the season. It's another reason why I'm not the biggest fan of the mid-seasons, because the openers and finales don't have much to do with each other. As mixed as the 4th was, I really like how they went about having the arc set up in the beginning with the whole mystery throughout, and then it coming back with T-Rex at the end.
A hot steamy take. Rainbow Dash and Derpy would have been such a memorable duo if censorship didn't end up getting to her. I remember being a kid and listening to her first lines with Rainbow Dash, and it made me think she would end up as a major character later in the show as one of Rainbow Dash's friends from Cloudsdale, or just some pony who looks up to her. I wanted more lines between the two ever since.
Yeah, the whole Derpy censorship thing is still so whack. I think if they were allowed to use her more, there definitely would have been the opportunity to have her alongside Rainbow Dash, like what this person is suggesting. And there are always fanfics. If you're talking about this from the perspective of watching this as a kid and wondering who this was, that's really funny. Like the brony fan service. Oh.
Applejack is honestly the most underappreciated character in the show, because while she does have her life already set out, she's also one of the more stable of her friends and is usually the reliable one. She's the mom friend of the group, and it sucks that she's shafted by Hasbro because she doesn't sell well to girls.
Her and Rarity seem like the most chill, which is why I prefer their episodes. Applejack is a really great character, and it's upsetting they saw a problem with her. I feel like G5 could have used a character like Applejack, who is the sensible one of the group. Applejack stans, always welcome on the channel.
As a gay, I can't stand Starlight and Trixie together. Any episode that focuses on them always devolves into petty squabbling, and it's awful.
Yeah, the two we see them in, the traveling and the teacup one, I'm not remembering names. They don't seem to be friends in the way the main 6 are. I take it as more a mature take on friendship for older kids and teens who understand that you can get mad at your friend. However, I understand it can come off as kind of cynical compared to the more bright, bubbly main 6 episodes where everything works out in the end.
I really like how romance isn't a big part of the show. I'm a sucker for romantic pairings, for example Fluttercord, but I'm actually really glad nothing was explicitly confirmed romantic-wise when it came to the main 6. I think it's important that most of them were independent even in the finale episodes. It was also really nice to see Rarity as an independent business owner at the end of the series, considering how the fanbase, and the show at times, treated her as the boy crazy one of the group.
This is a thing I feel like FIM has gotten a lot of praise for already, being a show mostly focused on a female cast, but not falling into the usual tropes, where all the girls have to get together with a guy because they think it'll be marketable. Believe it or not, there was an episode proposed for season 1 where the main 6 would have all had boyfriends. Yeah, look it up, that was something I talked about in the Rainbow collab. In terms of female characters, it's great at showing that girls can like different things and have different interests. In fact, there even were a few girls who got together with other characters in the end. A little bit of everything.
G5 shouldn't have been connected to G4. It's pretty clear Hasbro thought they could repeat the success G4 had by having G5 be connected to it, and when it didn't reach expectations, they threw it away. It doesn't help that G5 being connected to G4 introduced multiple plot holes.
Kind of exactly my thoughts. They really thought they were gonna get the best of both worlds, having G5 technically be its own thing, but still connecting it to the generation that everyone and their weird 40-year-old male cousin loved. From what I understand, corporations are always worried about constant growth, so of course they were gonna set their expectations super high for the next thing if G4 did so well. Again, G4 being the most popular of all time. They probably had a ton of market research and graphs down to the tiniest decimal of how to engineer it to be good, but that can't replace just having a group of actual artists at the helm developing a show. Can they please learn that lesson for G7?
I feel like a lot of people in the brony fandom circa 2010 to 2014 only referred to Applejack as forgettable and easy to overlook because she was the one who was the least easy to make into cutesy anime type waifu bait.
Ah, yes. This is something like the Fluttershy being a 35-year-old NEET. Maybe in 2012 there wasn't as much fetishized art of Applejack, but it had to have been there, and trust me, it's around today. But no, absolutely, as long as there was clopping, there was some weirdo stuff of AJ out there.
The real golden age of MLP wasn't seasons 1 to 3, it was 4 to 6.
I think there are distinct eras of the show, with 5, 6, and 7 being what I consider the mid-series, and 4 as this kind of weird transitional period between 1 and 3 and that. I'm always curious to see what they would have done if they had just ended it after season 4 and tried some kind of other reboot in the middle. Seasons 1 through 3 were great. 4 took it in a new direction, and I'm sure convinced people at the time, like, yeah, this might need to end soon. There's this thing I hear about shows. They need to go on for a good run, but then have one extra bad season, so people could see what it would have been like if they ran it into the ground, which they did do with FIM in some cases. Seasons 1 through 3 are the classic era. 4 is an exception, 5 through 7 is the mid-era, and everything post MLP the movie is the end. That's how I like to divide it up. That being said, I know there are a lot of great episodes that happened during that mid-era.
Pinkie should have been a Pegasus instead of Fluttershy because of her nod to being a descendant of Surprise.
Pinkie Pie should have been a Pegasus, like the creepypasta. Pinkie Pie was originally gonna be a Pegasus, which is why she jumped off the building. I don't know, I think Pinkie Pie being an Earth pony and having her own sort of power is good enough. It's one of those things that's hard to imagine how they'd handle. I'm pretty sure that was one of the pitches for the supposed G5. Remember with the graph of all the different art styles? I think making it definitively connected to early generations is a little too. I like that they changed it and kept her as an Earth pony like her original G3 counterpart.
Why didn't Morbius become an antagonist in the last season?
Yeah, why didn't they do that? What is Hasbro doing? Well, I hope we all learned something today. I think it's great to hear opinions about MLP and talk about them here in a respectful, cordial, civil manner, and I hope people will be doing the same in the comments. Speaking of the comments, you have any MLP hot takes that haven't shown up here? I can make like 3 more of these if we're being honest.